Okay, we're back, we're live. What fun we are having today. From Alberta DeGently, who is actually the sister of Mina Morita, the former chair of the PUC, and who now writes an incredible blog, straight from the shoulder blog, really interesting. I don't know if you've seen that, Marco. You got to see her blog, Mina Morita. Okay, anyway, now it's Marco Mangelsdorf, fresh off the plane, well, one day, from China, where he enjoyed the smog. We're going to talk about that. Welcome to the show in person, Marco.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jay. And I thought, what better occasion maybe to do a duet for One Enchanted Evening from South Pacific, the two of us.
If you start, I'll follow.
One
Enchanted evening.
Okay, that's enough.
That's enough. We don't have time for this. We entitled this show here on Marco and Me, You Heard It Here First. You may be wondering why we said that, you heard it here first, because there's something that happened minutes ago that you don't know about, and that here, and we love to have scoops. I mean, yesterday we were talking with our correspondent in Istanbul about the bombs in Ankara. We love to have scoops. And here's a scoop today. Marco, what do you got?
Well, the big news of today is that the Public Utilities Commission issued a DNO decision order on the long-awaited distributed energy resources docket. It's a 300-page docket. I have not read through it yet. This is broke minutes before I'm sitting down with you. So this will be telling the rest of us, telling utility companies, telling everybody in the PV industry the roadmap for the months and years to come as far as the new tariff, the new Internet Connect agreement, which will replace net energy metering. Long live NEM. NEM is now dead as of today. And also I would
NEM
expect—
is dead, so what, we're going to talk about what lives after NEM.
And also, I expected to go into some depth and detail regarding energy storage as well, how that's going to be integrated on the customer side of the meter, and how the rules and regs going forward are going to show us into the promised land. Okay,
that's enough for about 2 minutes. Joke. So, first of all, the implications of NEM is dead. What does that mean to us? All of those situations where people who have solar were effectively getting an export rate when they sold it back, so to speak, to the utility, that's over. Is it effective right now? We don't know.
My understanding is that NEM comes to an end as of today, which, if I'm correct in my understanding, all the net energy metering applications which have been received as of today and prior to today will be NEMable, will still be under net energy metering. All those applications starting tomorrow will be under the new regime, the new tariff.
And the new regime is the main thing is that the export rate, what you get paid back when you sell energy, excess energy back to the utility, be at a different dollar amount.
What you get credited back. So for the past more than 14 years now, since NEM was introduced in July of 2001, all that export power was credited at the full retail rate, whatever that retail rate happened to be. And now that rate will be below retail, and although I can't confirm it with 100% certainty, I was told that at least here on Oahu, which has typically HECO has cheaper electric prices, always has, compared to MECO and HELCO, that rate will be in the 15 cent a kilowatt hour
That's
range.
Less than what HECO was asking.
My recollection is that under their transitional distributed generation, or TDG tariff, which they proposed back in January, that they were asking for 18 cents a kilowatt hour for Oahu. So if it's true that they went down from 18 cents to 15 cents, that was a decision made by the commission to credit, under the new regime, credit homeowners, business owners at a even lesser rate than was requested by Hawaiian Electric.
So from that alone, you would say, gee, they did something for Hawaiian Electric that was even better than what Hawaiian Electric was asking by 3 cents, which is a fair percentage.
Right.
But if you take it all together, there's one more element that you haven't mentioned yet, and that is the baseline cost of being connected.
Right.
As I recall, Hawaiian Electric wanted a substantial increase in that. I mean, like 3 times what the
50 or
17
more dollars a month for the
Yeah.
minimum customer charge, yeah.
So now the PUC did not go that high. It actually fixed a fairly modest increase, right?
My understanding is that the minimum customer charge has been increased from here on Oahu, if I'm not mistaken, it's somewhere sub $20 a month. In other words, if you use conceivably 0 power net over the course of the month, you still have to pay a utility bill, and the utility bill there's a minimum customer charge approved by the PUC, and that's been somewhere under 20 bucks a month here, a little bit more in the neighbor islands, and that will increase to about $25 per month.
So that's not nearly what Hawaiian Electric was asking. They were asking 50, 60, I forget exactly what it was. And so, so you have to take these all at the same time. On the one hand, the PUC has done better than Hawaiian Electric asked on the export rate. And on the other hand, they have not given Hawaiian Electric the monthly base charge it wanted either.
Right.
So you have a mixed bag.
Again, very, very preliminarily, that's what we know. And the devils, of course, will be in the detail. And Hawaiian Electric has a very short fuse, essentially, right now to make it all happen. I mean, to go from one regime to the next in the course of a day or two is dramatic. But if they had, let's say, pushed it out even further, if they had said, let's say, by next week or 2 weeks from now or a month from now, that's when the date will be. It would just be this mad, even madder than mad, rush on the part of businesses like mine and homeowners to try to get in under the gun, which they've already been doing now for the past 7 months. So I think it's reasonable to say, okay, we're going to make this change. It's going to happen immediate. It's not going to be months from now, because that'd be even crazier.
Yeah, and don't you think that the PUC was fully aware of the risk of this Oklahoma land rush kind of phenomenon by saying, right now, let's do it right now.
Yeah.
That's a good move.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know, this docket, you mentioned that the docket over Hawaiian Electric's desire application to increase the base rate was filed back in January of this year. But the docket for the DER is more recent, as I recall. And what I'm getting at is the PUC handled this with some alacrity. They didn't drag it on, did they?
I believe the DER docket goes back to sometime in 2014.
Oh.
I'm tempted to say August.
Okay.
So it has been around for a year,
year.
I believe.
That's still
or
a
longer.
short time historically.
Well, I mean, Chair Iwase has said on a number of occasions that, look, this is a commission that can walk and talk and chew gum at the same time. We're not overwhelmed 100% by what's going on with the merger docket. And this is one of 4 that has now been taken care of, with the remaining ones being the demand response docket, the decoupling docket, and then the power supply improvement plan docket, the PSIP. So those 3 still remain to be decided, but this is the DER, perhaps the largest one.
Yeah,
of the
well,
4.
you and I was moderating a panel you were on at the Asia Pacific Clean Energy Summit a couple of months ago, 45 days ago, it seems like. And my view of it, as I expressed at the time, and I think people generally agree, that DER was really important in order to straighten things out. And the question I put to you is, what's going to happen with the grandfather provision here? There's a lot of people who already have NEM, and now they're entitled to keep NEM. And we got to take a look at that order and see whether that's indefinite or for a defined period of time. So, what's the net effect of all of this? Because we actually have an awful lot of people already have solar, and already have NEM. This may be, a small step forward rather than a huge one.
It's been my understanding, and I think Hawaiian Electric has been very consistent these past months, that all those individuals and companies, homeowners who have had a NEM system will continue to have a NEM system. They're not going to go back and decide on any type of basis, well, you can stay, but you can't. I think that'd be a minefield. That would be incredibly counterproductive thing for Hawaiian Electric to do. And I don't believe they've ever even considered that. So everybody who's NEM now will continue to be NEM for the foreseeable future. So that's not a concern that I can see. One of the things that stands out to me in this decision is that in our state we've had a number of companies such as Solar City and a company called Sunrun and others who have been incredibly successful at essentially providing tens of thousands of photovoltaic systems to homeowners through a lease arrangement. And that lease arrangement is predicated on saving money off of your utility bill if you didn't otherwise do it. And that was predicated on being able to offset utility power that you're purchasing and being credited for at the retail rate. So now that retail rate is no longer part of the equation in terms of the export power. So for these third-party ownership modeled companies, their value proposition takes a demonstrable hit.
So is it ever written in these agreements, you know, you're in the business, so maybe you would know, where whatever rate is agreed on in the contract documents with the homeowner is subject to change if some of the assumptions are changed, like for example NEM? Is it possible that this is going to this is going to enable Solar City and others to change their purchase price?
I'm not an expert in knowing the nitty-gritty of each and every agreement that these different companies have with the end user, the homeowner, but it's my overall understanding that going to their legally binding documents and to modifying them unilaterally in a case like this to try to maintain your value stream.
Oh, we can't do that, but maybe there's a provision in there that says if our assumptions change, then we get to renegotiate the price.
I don't know.
I don't either.
Yeah.
And it would be a test of how visionary the lawyers were
Right.
when they drafted these things in the first place.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see how this falls out on the grandfather side. But clearly, if there is no such provision, those homeowners are going to be, well, let's see. Yeah, the homeowners are going to be paying too much as against the assumptions.
The value of their photovoltaic system, and more specifically, the value of the electricity produced by their photovoltaic system will be modified to their detriment.
Yeah, I misspoke. They're going to be paying, that they will have to pay more, or they won't get the same export return. And so one of the assumptions will be running against them instead of for them.
That said, I believe that the difference is going to be nominal, more on the marginal side than really substantive. So in terms of, I don't want to come across as trumpeting the bad news, that this is going to be really bad news for people who go this route in the future in terms of going with the Sunrun or Solar City or SunPower lease. But it's kind of nibbling at the edges. Another interesting thing is that net energy metering was never designed to have homeowners and business owners go into the surplus power production business and let alone make a profit and become independent power plants and get value for that export power. And it's a good thing, I think, to try to reduce the value of export power from these systems. Why? Because people in my business across the state have often been oversizing systems. And that wasn't the design, that wasn't the reason for NEM to begin with. You were supposed to take care of your own power needs, not get into the surplus power production business, which I think is reasonable.
You know, and there's a fairness issue here too, and I've always felt that exporting at the retail rate doesn't give the utility credit for having the infrastructure to take that, that surplus energy. So it's not fair to charge it to give credit at the retail rate. This is more fair. Good for the PUC.
Yeah.
Good for Randall Iwase. Good for Hawaiian Electric. This is a fairness that could have been, should have been achieved a long time ago.
Well, and it follows suit with what Kauai Island Utility Cooperative did, 6 years ago when they formally ended their NEM program with nary a peep. Hawaiian Electric tried to do the same in the years gone by, and we're told, we're not going to let you do that. You're not going to say that you've reached the cap and you can end now. So they've done it, whether you can say they've done it under duress, but they've done it because they've been told to do it, whereas the other utility in the state was able to allow their program to go away.
Before we go to the break, I just want to pick your mind on one thing. Are these two things bonded at the hip? That is the reduction of the base rate. In other words, if I am grandfathered and I still get the higher export rate, do I maintain my low base rate, or do I now have to pay the higher base rate?
As far as I understand, Jay, it's everybody. All utility customers, unless I could be incorrect here, all utility customers will be subject to the same minimum customer charge of $25 some odd a month. Now, there aren't that many on a percentage basis who actually are in that category, unless you happen to be a NEM system owner and you've installed a fairly large NEM system, a PV system.
Okay, well, that's fair. It's a fairness that everybody gets charged. And as a person who doesn't have solar, I would not want to see, people get grandfathered in for, all these perks. So I think it's more fair that way. If I had been determining that base rate, I'll tell you right now, it would have been higher. But that's okay, just me. We're gonna take a short break, is that okay? That's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar in Hilo. On his way back from China, it's Marco and me here on a Tuesday, and you heard it here first, is the name of our episode. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Carlos Juarez, host of Global Connections, and I want to invite you to come join us. We cover a range of global issues. We bring a lot of expert opinion, a lot of issues, whether they're contemporary events happening in the world or maybe looking at things from a more historical perspective. Global issues, very important for us to understand in this globally interconnected world. Join us here on Global Connections.
Hi, my name's Cindy Matsuki, and I host the show High Growth with HTDC on Think Tech Hawaii. This is the show where we talk about all things tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing, because there's so many things going on in Hawaii and more people should know about them. So this is the program that you can come and find out about all the things happening in Hawaii. And this show also airs on Olelo 54 along with Think Tech Hawaii. And it broadcasts live every other Tuesday at 3 p.m. So don't forget, check out the show Tuesday, 3 p.m. every other week. High Growth with HTDC. Thanks.
Hey, we're back. We're live with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar on his way back from China, and I guess soon enough you'll be going back to Hilo, yeah?
Yes, this afternoon.
Okay. And we're talking about, you heard it here first. We're talking about NEM is dead. That's the big news.
Long live NEM.
Long live whatever follows now.
NEM is dead, long live NEM.
Okay, now you sent me some interesting profit numbers while you were in China. You sent me things. What's that all about? Some of these companies now are making a profit again?
I happened to come across some interesting data on the two largest residential solar lease companies in the country. Number one is SolarCity, and number two, I believe, is Sunrun. They're both based in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area. And I've been in this business a very long time, and I've seen all kinds of trends and counter trends and developments and people coming and going and products coming and going. And one of the things I found really striking is to take a kind of a macro step back. I've determined that there are essentially two categories of businesses in the United States, for-profit businesses I'm talking about. The vast majority of businesses in the US, like mine, live and literally die based on whether we're profitable or not. And needless to say, companies come out of business and go out of business all the time as to determine on whether they make a profit or not. That's one category, the big category in terms of gross number of businesses. And then you have another smaller category of businesses that are not living and dying, at least in the near term, and the near term can go on as long as 5, 10 years, where they do not need to be profitable for quarter after quarter, year after year after year, because they're living in a different reality, essentially, a different business reality. And with these two companies of SolarCity and Sunrun, SolarCity has been public now for a number of years. Sunrun just became public last year. To look at what these businesses have done on a profit and loss basis, they're clearly in my business category number 2. And that's all kind of highbrow stuff and very interesting on kind of a macro level, but on a more personal level, on a more local level, my company and others are competing. We're competing against the Sunruns out here and the SolarCities out
Don't have
here.
to make a profit.
And they are installing systems, PV systems, at pricing that is not sustainable for my company. It's less than $4 a watt. And yes, there are some companies that are able to do $4 a watt. I'm not able to do $4 a watt and be sustainable. So my company and other companies are competing against these folks from California who are able to rack up, and I just happened to note this down because I was going to be talking to you, so I do it off of memory. Let me just get my little white piece of paper here so I don't misspeak here. For example, again, SolarCity is the biggest one. Since they have been public, and of course they have to publish their information, if you look at their P&Ls, which is all public knowledge, to date, they've lost somewhere cumulative of over $1 billion with a B, $1 billion. As far as I know, they've never been profitable. For 2014, they lost $375 million. And the first 6 months of this year, $302 million. First 6 months, 302. That's a fair chunk of money. And they're doing record business. Sunrun just recently became public, so their data doesn't go back as far, that's publicly available. First 6 months of 2014, according to the public data, they lost $57 million. First 6 months of this year, they lost almost double that, $102 million. And it's amazing to me, really, that, again, there are these two different categories of businesses. And as long as new money keeps coming in, if you're losing money, and then people can say, oh, Mangelsdorf, he just doesn't get it. And I've had close friends of mine in the business who say, well, yeah, you're kind of right, but you really don't understand. You don't understand the way things work. And I'm the first to probably admit, I don't understand the way things work. But I do see numbers, and it amazes me, really, that the more you sell, the more business you do, the more money you lose, and that's okay. And in fact, you attract even more money, seemingly the worse that you do, because there's the belief that at some point these investors will make a profit. They will be able to accrue, a reasonable rate of return. But again, I'll circle back to what's most important for me, my company and other companies like mine here, is that we're competing against these mainland-based companies who have done very well in our state here and provided PV systems for a lot of people at substantial value. But they've been able to do it while losing a significant amount of money and essentially doing something that I can't do. I mean, I can't afford to lose $300 million. I can't afford to lose $3 million. I can't afford to use several hundred
The
thousand.
big guy loses the money, makes it harder for you. You may have to go out of business because you can't turn a profit. And then when he's got a greater share of the market, he raises his prices, reduces his loss. Isn't that the way it works in antitrust law?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see, to go back to our scoop of today, it'll be interesting to see just what kind of adjustments that the big ones, big boys and girls, will be making in lieu of or in response to NEM is dead, long live NEM.
Yeah.
Because they're going to have to come up with something that will be able to address the inevitable questions of the new homeowners who are interested in their product.
But this explains, maybe we weren't focusing on it, but this explains why the national solar companies have been so successful in a way. They make up the loss in volume, as the joke always goes. So they make it harder for the local companies to survive.
Well, I'm not privy to the the internal strategic discussions or decisions on the part of those companies, but I mean it's very clear that if you look at the data, which I track, especially in Oahu, in terms of the major players and who's installing what in terms of making sales, that these two companies have done very, very well. This is a key market for both Solar City and for Sunrun.
Okay, let's talk about the merger. It's always an important topic, and it's what I discussed with Dwayne Shimakawa yesterday, and we didn't finish our conversation. So you must be thinking about that while you're traveling. You're involved in it, and certainly there's been plenty of speculation about it, and it casts, in my view, a damper on pretty much everything that happens these days because we need to get through it. You mentioned there were a number of important dockets that Randy Iwasi and the PUC had, were addressing and gotten through. Good for them, but this is the biggest one of all. This is the one that has such a big effect on everything else. So what's the status now? We're waiting on an evidentiary hearing. That's about it, I guess. Huh?
Well, in the past week, all the interveners had the chance to submit rebuttal testimony to the commission. The rebuttal testimony to the 1,000+ pages that the applicants, HEI and Xterra, filed on the 31st of August. So HIEC, Hawaii Island Energy Co-op, filed our rebuttal testimony last week. And out of the 28 interveners, including the consumer advocate, 24 of the 28 submitted testimony this past week, rebuttal testimony. And as of the end of this week, the applicants have until to submit rebuttal testimonies to our rebuttals. So they're working on their rebuttals to our rebuttals, and that'll, I think, bring the rebuttals to the rebuttals to the rebuttals to a close. And then from mid-October until early November, not much is going on other than preparing for the evidentiary hearings. There's going to be a pre-evidentiary hearing on the, pre-evidentiary meeting on November 4th, if I'm not mistaken, where the parties will all be in attendance. I'm not sure if I'll have to be there or not, to map out what's going to happen during the approximate 3 weeks, or a little less than 3 weeks of the evidentiary hearings from late November to December. But I mean, there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of the procedure, who the witnesses are going to be, who can talk to the witnesses. Is it going to be, as you would find in litigation, you will have, the attorney who's on your side and the prosecuting attorney coming after you, and so forth and so on. So
Yeah.
it's up in the air.
I'm sure it'll be
Yeah.
public, though, and the public will be very interested to see it happen.
As long as you're wearing proper
You have to wear
business
proper
attire, with
yeah.
the fashion police being empowered at the door
Yeah.
to send away people like you who's wearing something other than proper business attire.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you think they're attempting to achieve by requiring shoes, for example?
A certain level of decorum,
Decorum,
I guess,
okay.
and to keep the riffraff and rabble-rousers who would crash the party, perhaps. I don't know, and I don't.
You think they suspect that might happen?
Well,
Because it has happened.
you look at some of the gatherings here.
Yeah. So, okay, what do you think is going to come up in the, I mean, we don't know exactly, but in substance, what is going to come up in the evidentiary hearing? What's at issue? For example, they're not going to actually discuss the co-op idea in the evidentiary hearing, are they?
Well, if I am called as a witness, which is possible because I submitted both testimony on behalf of HIEC and rebuttal testimony last week on behalf of HIEC. then I would be considered legitimate game. And to what extent the NextEra or HEI attorneys would choose to really question me, I don't know. I mean, we have maintained from the very beginning a very consistent position. We're not for or against the merger, and that stays the same. We have been trying to put the idea of a co-op as a possibility out there for consideration.
By this proceeding? By this proceeding, by this docket?
Within this docket, yes.
In the thought that this docket could treat your request that you be considered in the final decision, that you would want them, I don't know if you said this publicly, you would want them to give your co-op some resonance, some advance, some traction,
right,
in this process, so that at the end of the process, you're ahead of where you are now,
right,
as being a player, say, in the Big Island. I mean, do you think there's really a chance that the PUC will do that?
Well, I mean, we're already immeasurably ahead now compared to where we were in January.
Because people know about it.
Because people know about us. In my absence, there were 2 listening sessions on the Big Island, on the Hilo site first and Kona. And according to my folks there, and also according to the press reports, there was a very significant turnout on the part of HIEC supporters. And we have this great T-shirt, which I need to get you a copy. It says, "Own the Power." Own the Power.
Yeah,
It's a great,
it was in the paper,
great, great
and it was
logo.
it was quite a meeting. It was very energetic. What can I say? and there was a high percentage of people wanted the co-op in lieu of any other arrangement. So I think you have a lot of friends on the Big Island,
yeah.
Marco. The question is whether the jurisdiction of this docket covers your request or expectation. And there are many who say that it doesn't,
Right,
as much
right.
as you like it to.
Right.
You know.
No, and I certainly respect that position. I mean, that's ultimately up to Randy Awase, Lorraine Akiba, and Mike Champley to decide what's within the purview of this proceeding, what's in the purview of the docket. It's not up to me, it's not up to the NextEra, it's not up to HEI. And our position has been, it's not only kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but a once-in-several lifetimes opportunity to, at this really key decision-making juncture, to make a case for what we feel to be is in the benefit of the 195 some odd thousand residents of the Big Island.
But let me assume for a minute that they decide one way or the other. That yes, they approve of the NextEra deal, or they don't, whatever, most of the choices. Or they approve with conditions, and then it's up to NextEra to accept the conditions. But it's not a once-in-a-lifetime deal, because the day after that, or for that matter, any time from this moment, this instant moment here, you and me together, you could go down to the PUC and start a second docket, couldn't you? And that docket would be to discuss the co-op as a business entity choice on the Big Island, right?
I don't think it would make sense to do that unless there was a willing seller.
Okay.
In other words, just open the docket for the purpose of opening a docket, saying this co-op idea is really cool for the Big Island, we want to open a docket. I would think that's conceivable. I would think theoretically that's possible. Is it practical? Does it make sense, considering that these things cost money? Attorneys cost money?
Plenty of money.
Plenty of money.
Tens of millions so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would really be part and parcel of finding a willing, first and foremost, finding a willing seller. Because while there's been talk on Maui, and also Representative Chris Lee here on this island, talk of either through a public condemnation, eminent domain strategy, which I would see as a hostile takeover, or taking conceivably, as I think Lee has alluded to perhaps taking away the franchise that has been granted Hawaiian Electric, which I also see as a hostile takeover. Or anything but friendly, I guess, maybe would be the better way to put it.
Lots of legal issues around that.
What we're trying to do is anything but hostile, in my opinion. It is simply, hey, this is really a key critical decision-making juncture for us in the state and also specifically for the Big Island. And we look to what KIUC has done over the past 12 years, I think quite successfully. And it's not just pie in the sky.
So you're kind of hoping that in the context of this existing docket, the approval or disapproval docket, that there will come a moment where somebody says, you know, we'd like to sell to HIDC. That's, I guess, if I had to shake it and bake it, that would be the primary reason you're there, because that may happen. With whatever consternations may come down the pike, somebody could pick up the phone and call you, Marco, and say, okay, we're willing to sell.
Do you remember one of the most lovely songs by the Everly Brothers? Dream, dream, dream.
Yeah, okay, we were gonna do Enchanted Evening. Now we're gonna do the Everly Brothers. We're gonna do this together, but right after the break.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on Think Tech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Hi, my name is Stan Osserman, and I host the show every Friday here on Think Tech Hawaii called Stan the Energy Man. We talk about everything energy, from anaerobic digesters to batteries to hydrogen fuel cell and grid power. And we do that to keep you informed on the latest technology that's out there and the things that are going on in Hawaii. We broadcast every Friday from noon until 1 o'clock, and I hope you'll tune in. So sometimes we'll be on Think Tech, and sometimes we'll be on Olelo Channel 54, and I'd like you to listen in to me and join me every Friday. We'll see you then. Aloha.
Third.
Okay, here we are, we're back, we're live with Marco Mangelsdorf, Marco and me. You heard it here first. I love that title. Okay, but we gotta get to China because, you know, any trip to China is so good. And I think that has come to feel that, you know, to talk to people who return from distant places is educational. It's like a travelogue, but it's more than that, especially in a talk show. As a matter of fact, Mike Hamnet, who is the co-chair of the Energy Policy Forum, and his wife, Francia, are coming here later today to talk about the trip they took on a riverboat to St. Petersburg. So it's the same thing. Let's talk about your trip to China. First, I want to show the pictures that you brought back from Beijing, was it?
It's actually a city called Shenyang, which is in Liaoning province, which is one of the more northern provinces.
And they got, well, let's look at number one picture.
So this photo was taken on October 11th of, I believe it was 2012 or 2011. And as you can see, blue sky, white clouds, clear day, good air to breathe. So this is a day where it's nice to walk, would be nice to walk the streets or the countryside there in and around Shenyang.
Okay.
This was taken 10 days later. Same vantage point, same image, except rather different in terms of air quality. So the difference of 10 days. What happened in 10 days? Well, amongst other things, that's when the heating season officially started in and around Shenyang. So you had a lot more nasty things being burned as boilers were fired up and so forth. So I'm just so struck by the contrast between clean air and god-awful air, clean air and god-awful air. And while I was there in Shanghai, the air quality was typically pretty good, And you can go to various websites, both from the US consulate and also private websites that will tell you what the PM 2.5 factor is. That's the particulate matter, 2.5 microns in size. And yet, at the same time, Beijing was suffering through pretty god-awful air because
Their air is worse than Shanghai.
it is
generally,
typically
yeah.
worse. And I thought, well, what causes that? Because there's quite a bit of coverage in the Chinese press about pollution. It's a big topic over there, understandably so.
People walk around with gas masks.
Yeah, it's right in their
Yeah.
right in their face and in their eyes.
Yeah.
And
And particulates are not good for you.
no. And the one of the reports I read is that one of the reasons that Shanghai
This is a fabulous picture. Can you describe this picture?
Well, it shows somebody in a running garb with a number that they just either ran or are about to run in a marathon. This participant warms up in the Beijing marathon, and he's smoking a cigarette. And cigarettes are a whole different story over there, which maybe I'll mention in a moment. But as far as the pollution this past week or past couple weeks in Beijing, one of the big reasons is because in nearby Hebei province, because Beijing, like a number of Chinese cities, is a special administrative region. But they're surrounded by different provinces, and to the south is Hebei province, is that the farmers are burning straw that they have to get rid of. And the only way to get rid of it is to burn it. So you have farmers in the nearby surrounding area of Beijing who are burning particulate, or who are burning biomass, essentially, because that's the way they traditionally have done it, and is causing worse pollution. And to kind of take that in a more macro level, I don't know if you've been following what's been going on in Southeast Asia, but in Indonesia they've been having these fires.
We have followed it, yeah, same thing.
It has polluted the entire region.
Thousands of
Malaysia,
miles, yeah.
Singapore, Thailand. So these pollution events are on a massive, massive scale and affecting the health of tens of millions of people. So China has got, it's to me, it's a country of paradoxes, because they've had the most dramatic period of economic development probably known to man since Deng Xiaoping and the fall of Mao, death of Mao in 1976. Over a 30-year period, their economic development and their economic growth quantitatively has been phenomenal, truly phenomenal. And it's brought a lot of Chinese out of poverty. It's brought a lot of Chinese up into the middle class and upper middle class. They're traveling around the world in record numbers. They're coming to Hawaii in growing numbers. They're coming to Japan.
Number 2 economy in the world.
Yes.
Behind us, no question.
So these are all things that they're to be very proud of, but it's come at a tremendous environmental cost. And that'll be one of the big challenges that the current leader, Xi Jinping, and his leadership group in the party and in the government, that they are going to be dealing with in the years to come, is maintaining what they feel to be necessary economic growth, but at the same time dealing with levels of environmental pollution, of the air, of the land, of the water, of the food, that is sometimes just horrific.
Oh, here's your smoking charts.
Yeah.
We have only a minute left, so why don't you summarize?
So it's really striking in this chart is that the Chinese are huge smokers. There are about 300 plus million smokers in China, and 2 out of 3 men in China smoke cigarettes. They have, as you would think, high levels of tobacco-related illnesses, cancer, heart disease, strokes, and yet, figure that blew my mind, only about a quarter of people in China can tell you, if you ask them on the street, the dangers of cigarette smoking. So the public education campaign is woefully lacking, and one of the reasons that the government and the party, I believe, haven't done something more about it. Number one is culturally, it's very ingrained. If you and I were doing business, Jay, we'd probably be smoking, and one of the ways to kind of connect with each other, I'd be offering you a
Sure.
cigarette from my gold or red pack of cigarettes that would have is on the higher end in terms of ritzy cigarettes. So it's very much a cultural experience. Plus, the government derives a substantial tax base from selling tobacco.
Oh, that's not so good.
But at the backside, of course, is that they have to pay for growing costs of health care. So it was estimated that whereas about 1 million people are dying a year of smoking-related illnesses in China, by 2030 it could go up to 2 million.
And the cost to the community, to the country in general, is going to be huge. but I couldn't help remembering the old phrase, the opiate of the masses. In a funny way, that's what's happening.
You know who said that, right?
No.
Karl Marx. And he was talking about religion.
Religion, smoking.
Yes.
This,
yes.
it's a dissatisfaction point. Anyway, that's Marco Mangelsdorf. He's got wonderful ideas and does wonderful trips. And I wish we had more time to talk about his trip and to talk about what he's learned about energy on all of his trips and how he manages to stay in touch even while he's traveling. Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar and Hilo. Marco and me, we're gonna do this again in 2 weeks, right? On the Monday, right?
Here, here.
Here, here. You heard it here first. Thank you so much, Marco.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jay.
Aloha.